Hi guys, and welcome to Heidi's Fish Tank. Do not set up a fish tank until you watch this video. So this video is going to be all about the nitrogen cycle. I filmed it a little bit earlier, but honestly, the lighting was weird, and so I'm like, let's be a little bit more concise and we'll put it all in here. A lot of people get into fish keeping. They kill a bunch of fish, they don't know what they're doing, and then they leave fish keeping. And I think that that is a tragedy because I think the majority of people could really enjoy fish keeping if they understood this one factor. Also, do you like that giraffe painting in the background? My sister-in-law painted that for my daughter because giraffes are her favorite animal. And I'm sorry if my throat doesn't sound so good. I have strep right now, so. Anyways, so I've referenced this in a couple of my other videos, and I realized that this actually probably should have been the very first video that I ever posted, because if you don't have a basic understanding of the nitrogen cycle, nothing else you do in fish keeping is going to matter. You need to understand this. So what is the nitrogen cycle? Basically what happens is when you put a fish in your fish tank, it produces waste. Anything in your tank actually that's decaying will produce waste. So fish food that doesn't get eaten will produce waste. If you have a dead fish in there, it will produce waste. But most often what happens is you feed your fish eats the food, your fish goes to the bathroom, and it produces ammonia when it produces waste. Now, ammonia is toxic to fish. A lot of times you'll hear something called new tank syndrome, where all your fish are dying. That's because you've got this really high ammonia buildup and you don't have enough beneficial bacteria built up in your tank yet to convert that ammonia to something that is more safe for fish. So your fish goes to the bathroom, it produces ammonia. Ammonia ends up feeding bacteria that lives in the tank, and in this case, bacteria is a good thing. That bacteria begins to colonize, and then the bacteria converts the ammonia to something that is still toxic to fish, but is less toxic than ammonia, which is nitrite. So that is part 2 of your nitrogen cycle. The nitrite continues to feed the bacteria, and eventually the bacteria will convert the nitrite to nitrate. When you have 0 ammonia, 0 nitrite, and some levels of nitrate, you have now completed your nitrogen cycle. Now, nitrate, fish can handle. Fish do pretty well in some levels of nitrate. But if it builds up too much, it will also eventually kill your fish, which is why water changes are important, because that's typically, at least in freshwater, the only way to remove nitrate from your tank. So after my nitrate reaches 40 parts per million in my freshwater tanks, I do a water change. I remove some of the water in order to reduce my nitrate levels. So that is typically what happens. And the rule used to be, okay, go to PetSmart or Petco or wherever, set up your tank, let it run for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then add a fish in. And ideally, they wanted you to add 1 or 2 really hardy fish in at a time and wait. Wait until you've completed your cycle. Test your water. The thing about that is the ammonia is toxic and the nitrite is toxic. It's less toxic than ammonia, but it is still really not good for your fish. And so if they live through this entire nitrogen cycle, which will happen whether you are purposely setting up a nitrogen cycle or not. A lot of people say, I didn't cycle my tank, and what they really mean is, I did a fish in cycle. Your fish might live, but it's really a less than ideal situation, and they can get pretty injured from the whole nitrogen cycle. So there are ways to cycle your tank without fish. The most popular one on the internet is to add a little bit of pure ammonia into your tank. You want to make sure that it is ammonia that doesn't bubble when you shake it up and doesn't have any additives to it. So a lot of people use the Ace Hardware one, or I bought mine on Amazon. I'll try to remember to link that, the one that I bought, down below. And I've also seen like Dr. Tim's makes one, but you don't need that. You can use pure ammonia, which will be a lot cheaper. And people will add a little bit of ammonia to their tank until the cycle is complete. So again, this is with no fish in it. Because what happens is if you set up your tank for like 24 or 48 hours, like a lot of pet stores used to say and some still say. And don't add anything to it. If it doesn't have a source of ammonia, then there's nothing that's feeding the beneficial bacteria, and your nitrogen cycle won't be complete. So you have to add something to feed it. Personally, my preference is actually to just add fish food, because you already have fish food probably, or if you don't, you're going to need it for when you have fish. And the fish food will also decay in the tank and will produce ammonia, which will then produce nitrite and will then produce nitrate as the beneficial bacteria builds up. I've also heard of some people putting in shrimp, not a live shrimp. I guess you could do it with live shrimp, but again, it goes back to that kind of cruel thing. But a dead shrimp in there, and that will also produce decay. However you want to do it, I prefer the fish food method. I just think that it's a little bit easier, but most people on the internet like to do the ammonia setup. So there are a couple things you can do also to move your cycle along a little bit faster. So say you've ended up, as most of us do, accidentally buying the fish, not knowing about the nitrogen cycle, and now you've got fish in your tank. So the first thing you need to do is protect those fish. If you do a fish in cycle, it's going to take longer and it's going to be more work, because you have to do a lot of water changes in order to keep that ammonia and nitrite low. A lot of people think that those things live in the water column, and they're afraid to do water changes because they're afraid that it'll mess up their cycle. The bacteria actually lives on surfaces of your tank, some on the glass, some on your gravel or decor, mostly in your filter. Which is why, if you want to make it go a little bit faster, you can take some filter media, so maybe it's a cartridge or maybe it's sponge or bio balls or something, from someone else's filter that has an established tank, and put it into your filter. And that has beneficial bacteria on it. It will seed your filter and make the cycle go a little bit faster. There are also things like bacteria in a bottle, and they're a little controversial. Everyone has different opinions about them. In my experience, I did the top fin one, and I can only speak to the top fin one. It did absolutely nothing. It didn't help at all. And I'm a little skeptical of beneficial bacteria in a bottle, but some people swear by it, and that might help your cycle go a little bit faster. In my opinion, it's easier to just take some media from one of your friends that already has a tank. And then the other thing that you can do to help your cycle move along a little bit faster and also help protect your fish a little bit is add plants, because plants, one, they'll eventually consume nitrate. So you won't have to do water changes as often. Most people will still need to do water changes, but they'll consume the nitrate as food. But they'll also consume ammonia and nitrite before it converts all the way to nitrate. So that will help you protect a little bit if you have to do a fish in cycle, if you've ended up already bought your fish and now here you are. And then the last thing that you can do is use something like Chem Prime. Now, I think that generally any dechlorinator is fine. The thing that I like about Chem Prime is that it will temporarily, like I think it says 24 to 48 hours, convert ammonia and nitrite. It won't get rid of it, but it will convert it into a safe for fish. So you can dose a little bit of that, and you can use that when you do your water changes as well. So that is kind of the basics of the nitrogen cycle. There are a lot of resources out there, so I would definitely check out some of those resources that are going to go into a lot more detail than I just did in this video. But you have to have that much down, that much understanding, really, if you want to be successful in fish keeping. And that's ultimately what I want. I want you guys to be successful in fish keeping. Another question that people will often ask is, how long does the cycle take? For some people, it takes a couple of weeks. For some people, it takes a couple of months. It just depends on your tank, which is why it's really important to be testing your water. You can't just take your water to like Petco or PetSmart or your local fish store and have them test it. They'll test it, but that doesn't tell you much. You need to be testing it during the cycle. So I personally use the API master test kit, the liquid master test kit. And the reason for that is, one, it has all three of those. It also has a pH, which is a separate thing that we can talk about in a different video, but it has nitrite, nitrate, and an ammonia test in it. Whereas most of the strip tests, you're going to have to buy an ammonia one separate from the other strips. So usually ends up being about the same price. But you actually end up saving money by doing the liquid test kit because you get more tests out of it. In my experience, the API Master Liquid Test Kit is more accurate than the API 5-in-1 test strips. I do know that like Corey from Aquarium Co-op, which is a very great resource, and he knows way more about fish than I do, so I will link him down below. I know that he uses the Tetra all-in-one test strips, and those are accurate for him. So a lot of times people on the internet will tell you that test strips aren't accurate. I think that's probably because the API test strips are not accurate. But the API liquid test kit I think is absolutely awesome. The only thing is, with the test strips, even if you're using the Tetra one, you're still going to have to buy an ammonia test strip. So that's why I prefer the liquid one. But ultimately, testing your water is super duper important. Owning an aquarium is basically water chemistry. And so unless you're testing your water, you don't know what's going on in your tank. You're not going to know what your water change schedule should look like. Even once your tank is established or cycled, you still are going to need to test it. I test my water every week before I do a water change to see if I even need to do a water change. Yeah, I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you're new around here, hit the subscribe button, and if you never want to miss a video, hit the bell next to the subscribe button, because sometimes you can be subscribed to someone but not get notifications. So if you hit the bell, you'll always get notifications. And I'd love to hear from you guys down below. What is some of your experiences with fish keeping? Was this video helpful? Did you know about the nitrogen cycle before you set up your tank? I definitely didn't, but I've learned a lot since I looked into it, and knowing about the nitrogen cycle has helped me prevent a lot of fish death in my tanks. Anyways, I will talk to y'all soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.